Open your cerebral cortex and shift your lobes into upper beta phase, because you are going to have Bitcoin knowledge transmitted directly into your vestibulocochlear. Your host at Bitcoin Knowledge is Trace Mayer, an early Bitcoin advocate since it cost $0.25, but this is not intended to be investment advice. A doctor of jurisprudence, but this is definitely not legal advice. And an investor in core cryptocurrency infrastructure, including Armory, BitPay, Kraken, and Mitagio, but this is not a recommendation of those services. Here, you get fed via direct mind download with pure and free Bitcoin knowledge.
Okay, welcome back to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast. We have a tremendous interview with Peter Kirby. He's president of the Factom Project. Welcome to the podcast, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you, Trace.
So how'd you get down this rabbit hole of the magic internet money? How'd you get
How
here?
did you drink the Kool-Aid? I got into
Was it any good?
Still delicious, Trace. Grape flavored. It's perfect. 2012, end of 2012, I started getting interested in Bitcoin. I bought some. I bought enough that I was able to sell some and take my fiance at that point to France. So in the thousands range, not the millions range. But that was enough for us both to be sort of permanent Bitcoin geeks. And let's let her put up with all the other stuff I've done. Right. So as a recommendation to all the people out there who have significant others that are, let's say, skeptical, buy them a vacation. The best thing you can do for your future career in Bitcoin.
Better than chocolate.
Chocolate in southern France is fantastic.
Yeah, she won't whine about your magic internet money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now it's real internet money.
So we're proof of chocolate. So we're looking at this Factom project. One of the things I find absolutely fascinating about the Bitcoin blockchain is that from an information theory point of view, we're able to create a fact.
Oh, yeah.
An immutable fact.
Yeah.
So my background's in accounting, and, we've got debits and credits. It's a almost 500, 600-year-old system.
Sure.
And for the first time, because Satoshi solved the Byzantine generals problem, we now have a practical implementation of triple entry bookkeeping that has been able to create this immutable fact in terms of information theory. Can you talk a little bit about what are we doing with that at this Factom project? What are you doing to harness this tremendous innovation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've created this amazing digital ledger in the sky that's distributed and owned by all of us and none of us at the same time, right? Incredibly powerful piece of technology. And Bitcoin is really great for recording these financial transactions. But we're saying at Factom, hey, there's a lot of problems that look a lot more like data than just financial transactions, right? It's not just sending a coin. It's making all these data pieces immutable also. So the easy solution, or the easy way to think about this, is like tamper-proof records. How do you build a record-keeping system that, really does track every change? If I misspell something and I correct the spelling, I know that correction is tracked. If I, transfer a title record, I know that that's transferred correctly. I can follow it from the beginning all the way through. Right. So data and immutable data is a really, really powerful concept. And like you said, it builds this third party, totally auditable transparency layer for any business system, not just a financial transaction.
What about spoliation of evidence? I mean, Arthur Anderson, Enron, shredding documents.
Oh, there's good business in destroying stuff.
How's corporate America going to survive if we can't spoliate the evidence after the fact?
So, Paul Snow opened the Factom white paper by saying honesty is subversive, right? That transparent systems and truly immutable data is a really powerful concept that changes the way the world looks, right? If our banks are no longer black boxes, if our governments are no longer black boxes, if our business systems are no longer black boxes, that shifts the power, that moves the cheese of some awfully big rats. And they're going to fight back. But we really do believe that transparency is good for business, right? When you talk about the Enron example, you're talking about a company that imploded because it was lying. When you talk about the billions of dollars in fines that the banks paid for the robo-signing scandal, you're talking about like people getting foreclosed on that probably shouldn't have. You're talking about a lot of pain in these systems being black boxes.
Oh, and the people who are affected with that. I actually had a friend. He, West Point, Army Ranger.
Yeah.
He protects diplomats at a U.S. embassy. And while he was on assignment overseas, one of the major banks foreclosed on his house illegally.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
And then he had to fight him in court and it cost all this money and he eventually won, but didn't get all his money back. And
this is somebody who's serving our country and he gets screwed because big banks are in there filling in the blanks.
And lying.
Yeah.
And then covering up the lie after the fact.
Yeah. Because they don't want
erasing or changing the data.
Yes. So if you really think about immutable data, it's a powerful tool to protect individuals from big institutions, right? I mean, that's the libertarian voice. But like I said, there's a lot of value created there also. Don't forget, those are all mortgage-backed securities, right? Which means there's a buyer and seller on them. And they thought they were buying AAA bonds, but in fact, they were buying a lot more garbage. If you can start creating totally transparent business systems, you can start building better investment tools. You can start building better investors and better investments for people. Right. So there's a lot of value that can be created by honesty and transparency also. It's not all about catching the bad guys. It's about creating a lot of value for people who want to be the good guys.
How does Factom do this? You guys came out with what you did with the Project Gutenberg.
Yeah.
Maybe you can describe that a little bit.
Sure. Okay. So the idea of Factom is it's a data layer on top of the blockchain. It basically lets you build chains and chains of data. Every 10 minutes, we take everything in Factom, we Merkle tree it. So we hash that down to a single hash, and we put that in the Bitcoin blockchain, right? So you get to piggyback off all the security of that 400 petahash worth of proof of work.
And how do you put it into the blockchain? Is it in the op return? Is it in a multi-sig hash or op return?
It's an op return. It's basically a transaction. It's a financial transaction with a dust level Bitcoin.
Okay.
So that's basically how it works. Factom has its own consensus mechanism, its own security. But every 10 minutes, we basically roll it all up and put it into Bitcoin. So it creates an additional sort of audit layer for it.
Are the Satoshis that are used in the dust transaction recoverable?
They're spent, right? I mean,
they're spent, but
goes into the total mining rewards.
Because it's in the op return, but the dust amount, is it just going to sit in the blockchain indefinitely, or are you going to be able to reconsolidate those back into a transaction so the Satoshis are reusable? Because you would still have the hash in the block, right?
At some point we're getting beyond my technical ability, but I would assume that you could consolidate them. I would assume also we might want to spend more than just the dust level to make sure that it moves through the system fast. Our very smart developers are coming up with better ways to think about that, but it's an op return with some amount of transaction fee to make it an actual Bitcoin transaction.
Right.
You could do it with zero fees, but you can't guarantee it's going to go through.
Because you're talking about potentially, how many of these transactions could end up getting?
Well, we do it every 10 minutes, right? So it's going to be hundreds rather than billions.
But you'll probably have billions of transactions total, but you're hashing them all down via Merkle tree into the single hash, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the point of the story, this is part of the how do you solve Bitcoin bloat conversation, right? And the solution is not to put a ton of stuff into Bitcoin. It's to roll a ton of stuff up and put it in Bitcoin systematically, right? Roughly
via
once per block.
One hash.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that one hash can cryptographically prove thousands and tens of thousands of pieces of data.
Yeah. You've got cryptographic proof from that hash to any other point in Factom because it's a Merkle tree. So the way I think about it is it's just tiers of hashes that all you can roll up to any point. So it's sort of a systematic way to secure data, but Factom is a distributed hash table, right? So that data can be fully available. We're just piggybacking on all the proof of work. So you don't have to worry about the reversibility problem. You don't have to worry about building our own version of a proof of work blockchain. The innovation is really that you can build these blockchain technologies layers, just like the internet's built with TCP/IP at the bottom layer and HTTP, and then you go fancy tools like Flash and HTML5 on top of it. We're saying the Bitcoin blockchain provides a value layer that you can then build a data layer on top of. And then you can add tools like storage or Ethereum and some of these other like more complicated blockchain tools as a layer of the technology.
Or like one of my buddies built a plugin for the NetSuite's accounting software, a Bitcoin plugin, and you could have the entire state of the accounting system every 24 hours. Boom. And so,
secured.
Well, you know what the state was at that particular point in time, so now you've got this audit record. And I think, it was Paul Snow. He said that the absence of evidence is the evidence of absence. So when we start having, these regular checkpoints of what the state of a system was, then the absence of a checkpoint actually becomes evidence
significant
of something.
Proving the negative is a really hard thing to do unless you've got a systematic proof of positive.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that Satoshi solved very elegantly and taught us a lot about how we prove the negative, because it's a big deal. In a robo-signing situation, it's the document that you don't have that matters.
Yeah. And so our accounting professionals and our information systems securities professionals at, PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte & Touche and Ernst & Young, they need to be cognizant of this as a potential tool to reduce the audit risk in their engagements.
Oh, absolutely. Now that this exists, you can't not have it.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, they're just not acting professionally if they don't apply these types of measurements and these types of standards.
Best practices, right? And I believe that in this concept we call blockchain as a service, right? Everybody's going to take their accounting program and have a blockchain backend that makes it immutable. Everybody's going to take their audit system and their data management system and their document management system, and they're going to build this, as you said, third-party audit layer, right? Triple entry bookkeeping. And like you said, if you're not going to do that, then you're not serving your customers. Yeah.
You want to lie? Like, why do you want to change stuff after the fact?
Sure. Exactly. Like, you're not doing it. Clearly, you're an Enron. So, and I mean, hey, look at us being honesty is subversive kind of people. But
heaven forbid.
I know. Turns out that there's a lot of value to be created there.
I mean, I would like to know what my investments are doing. I'd like to know that
you have a right to.
Yeah, I mean, they have a fiduciary duty to me. Like, why don't they provide accurate financial statements that can't be changed?
And you bring up this really valuable concept that right now the way we do audits is you pull a banker's box down, you pull 3 random files out, and you make sure they're right. That's like 19th century technology.
Yeah, it should all be automated.
We should be able to automate it. We should be able to know that it never changed. We should be able to do that in real time. If you're missing a document for your mortgage, like a survey, you should be able to know at that moment you're missing it and go get it, right? If your P&L doesn't match up to the previous month, you should know why. And you shouldn't know why 6 months later or 18 months later, whenever they bother to do an audit. You should know why in the moment, right? This is what blockchains allow us to do because it's not a central database keeping this. It's not the PwC's central audit program that keeps track of all this. You've got an external layer that's public, distributed, owned by all of us and owned by none of us that's keeping these systems honest, right? And that's the power.
Yeah, I have a friend. She's a bank examiner for the Federal Reserve of New York. She's a big Bitcoin and blockchain enthusiast and just wonders why she's actually doing all this work when it could all be automated.
And wait a minute. At some point, somebody at PwC and Ernst & Young's going to go like, they're trying to put me out of a job. Well, obviously, there's always going to be smart people designing systems.
Right? But, as Gouda wrote, the sun retreats, the shadow flees.
Sunlight is the best.
Sunlight's the best disinfectant from a U.S. Supreme Court case. Yeah. But, the glow retreats, the shadows flee, which Nikola Tesla actually, it was his inspiration when he conceived of the AC current system because, as we brought electricity, the sheer amount of human labor that was needed just to wash clothes or wash dishes or all this stuff, we can have machines do a lot of this stuff. It raises standard of living, increases productivity. We really don't need people looking through all these paper documents.
Of course, that's a crappy job.
Is that really the highest and best use of our human labor?
No. Because the way they do that is the guy who's pulling the banker's box is the brand new accountant who's bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah.
Right. And they're charging billable hours, but
training them.
They're training.
Go get some more coffee.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We'll have robots to do that soon anyways.
But not only did electricity make it easier for us to wash our clothes, it made our clothes cleaner.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really the promise, that you build a real-time audit system on top of the blockchain, and it's checking at every moment that all the boxes are checked. You get much, much, much cleaner clothes. Mm-hmm. And that's the promise. For me, that's exciting, right? I'm on board with honesty is subversive, and I'm on board that our systems need to be not black boxes anymore.
Well, let's explore that a little bit more. I mean, usually I stick to, looking at the business applications on the podcast, but honesty is subversive. What about the memory hole? What happens when, like with this Project Gutenberg that you did, you took 30,000 of the world's greatest literature texts and you anchored them into the blockchain. So now we know that this Shakespeare book
existed
at that moment in time. And if a single comma is out of place in any of these 30,000 books,
we would know.
We have a different hash, we know.
Yeah.
So what type of a world do you see coming out of a place where the memory hole has been closed?
Well, more honesty, more transparency, right? I think that, like you said, they will be moving the cheese of some awfully big rats. There'll be some people who make a lot of money in trying to keep things not transparent that will fight back, right? Obviously, that's the case. But we'll create a tremendous amount of value. I mean, better governments, better financial institutions, better insurance institutions, better ways of moving money through the world. And that's a better world in my view. And obviously, this is a technology. The point of this conversation is not to say wow, how amazing is the future of this technology. What's cool is this happens now, right? We took these books, we put them into Factom. You can take your accounting system today, do a hash of the state of, either the whole system or 1,000 records or a single record, depending on how much granularity you want. Put it into Factom. It gets secured by the Bitcoin blockchain and, 400 petahash worth of work. And you can start building a better system today, right? And of course, we're a long way from banks that aren't black boxes. There aren't black boxes, but this is the path there. It's a thing, right? And
we see the trajectory of where the world's going. Yeah. The shadows are
retreating.
The rising sun, the shadows are having to retreat.
Let me tell you a fun story about a very practical solution for this. I was down in Central America, and this country had built a very expensive database where they digitized all the title records, right? Huge project. The World Bank sponsored it. And as soon as some bureaucrats got access to that database, they started giving themselves beachfront property, right? It's and everybody goes, well, it's Central America. But big deal, because when you don't trust the collateral and you don't trust who owns it, you end up paying 18% interest on your mortgage for 10 years. You have a credit card on your house, right? Which means that all entrepreneurship is normally funded by people borrowing against the assets they have, right? So you've got a very, very low capital base. You got a whole bunch of people who don't trust the government to record their stuff. So you got 60% of the title records in the country not even recorded. And it's a whole huge mess. So you go in and you say, hey, look, we were there. We talked to, all the important people, and we saw this, mess of records that they had and stuff. And we said, look, we can build you a tamper-proof layer for your entire title industry, build a 21st century application built in cloud technology, right? It's going to cost a fraction to deploy, and I can clean up your title system systematically, right? And what that means is not just that the title records get secured against the blockchain, but the whole process. The attorney that signs off and says, I agree this isn't fraudulent, that gets in the blockchain. The person who types in the legal description, into the blockchain. The person who verifies it, into the blockchain. So you got a proof of the whole process. You prevent the garbage in. Suddenly you got a path forward to unlock that, I think DeSoto called it $9 trillion in locked value in basically properties you can't land on because you can't trust the collateral. Suddenly you can start thinking about agricultural deals and mineral rights and people making a living from this land that they own without fear that somebody's going to go snatch it up because it's a nice piece of property and they have access to the database.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that Bitcoin, that's a tectonic plate level shift in terms of economics, is that Bitcoin has changed the economics of violence.
Yeah.
And it's drastically reduced the cost of protection when it comes to property rights.
Sure.
And so,
don't enforce it with guns, enforce it with the blockchain.
Well, yeah, I mean, go ahead, shoot that math problem. It's a great way to solve it. You use up all your bullets.
Yeah. Paul Snow said this beautifully. He said, he's like, we tried wars. Now we tried regulation. Let's try math. Right? And
that's a great way to solve problems.
It's hard to shoot at math.
Hard to argue with it too.
Yeah, it's math, right? But what does that mean? That means you can get out of the business of trying to fight over stuff and move to the business of starting to create value on top of it, right? If I'm a bank and I'm looking at Title A that's secured by some piece of, crappy software that bureaucrats have been hacking into, and Title B that's secured by the blockchain, it's pretty obvious where I want to lend my money, right? Which means that I can lend at a lower rate, which means people can invest more in infrastructure, which means people can borrow some money against their house and build that software application they've been working on. You start having a path toward economic growth that doesn't involve who has the biggest guns. Great. And it's not some pie in the sky thing. It's an application that
we got it right now.
Couple months to build, right? I can deploy it tomorrow. Yeah, I can deploy it in May, let's say. It's April now, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. But, Factom's an alpha product right now. You can build interesting stuff on top of it. We've showed a couple proof of concepts, and we're working on a bunch of other interesting proof of concepts. So,
cool. It's been a wonderful interview.
This has been fun.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to geek out about the economics of transparency.
Hey, I think that we're definitely changing a lot of things, and we're changing the way we perceive the world.
Yeah.
And this ephemeral nature of our history is going to become much more solid because it's going to be cryptographically provable.
To quote David Johnson, this is the beginning of recorded history.
Yeah, before blockchain and after blockchain.
Exactly. not to say that we don't have egos around this, right?
Hey, but everything that's gone before could be changed with an eraser or with a gun.
Sure.
But now, no.
Hard to erase math.
You can't just erase this hash in an off-return statement.
Sure.
That you can then use to cryptographically prove this entire Merkle tree and all the data contained within it.
Yeah. And obviously, with enough giant supercomputers, maybe you could change one of those hashes, but it's really hard to erase the whole record, right? The whole proof. And, Bitcoin blockchain has 400 petahash worth of work that goes into it every second, right?
Yeah.
It gets infinitely harder to change every brick below there.
Yeah.
So, it's powerful. It's a really powerful idea. And it's fun, obviously it's fun to geek out about it, but for me, it's even more fun to build this stuff for real. Right?
Yeah. Well, it's great talking with one of the players on the field instead of just the spectators. Thanks so much for being with us on the podcast. Peter Kirby, president of the Factom Project. Thanks for being with us.
It's a real pleasure, Trace. Thank you.
Be sure to get a copy of the free Bitcoin Guide at freebitcoinguide.com. Got a question or suggestion? Record your voice at bitcoin.kn. Don't be shy. To help the show, share bitcoin.kn with friends, post about it on Reddit, and otherwise spam the interwebs. Your iTunes comments and 5-star reviews are very important to us. Please continue tuning in to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, where we release interviews with the top people in the Bitcoin world. Now take some choline and let that Bitcoin knowledge consolidate.